Hey, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. I'm just sitting here thinking about something that's really impacted the entire course of my life, and I thought it would be helpful, maybe interesting to share with you the story of my health, of the struggle and the ultimate overcoming, well, at least mostly, of this disease that I've had, I think since birth, since I was just a little kid. I remember being like at 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, and I would have these like pains, stomach pains and little kind of maybe difficult relationships with food, so to speak. And at the time, this was a different time. It was the early mid '80s. My mom was always looking out for me, but like my dad and maybe other, adults in the world around me would kind of look at me like as if, you're fine, you just need to use the bathroom or something like that. And, it was this thing that I would struggle with. And even as an adult now, 43 years old, I think back to those times and I remember very, very frequently having these struggles. And that's okay. Many people have them, and I kept going, made it through school, nearly to the end of high school without there being any, major problem, anything that slowed me down or stopped me in any, considerable way. Um, but it got to the point where that wasn't the case, and I remember going on a vacation with a good friend of mine. We went to Hawaii, which was, absolutely like a trip of a lifetime, the kind of thing that you're like, wow, like awesome, this is incredible. But I was in so much pain. I was struggling so much with just like eating a regular meal. I would go to a restaurant with him and his mom and dad, and there would be like a bench outside on the sidewalk, and I would have to, I'd come in and try to eat a little bit, but I'd end up going back and literally laying on this bench outside. So, we got back home, and it was a wonderful trip, but there was that struggle that was holding me back and slowing me down, and we we made it back, and my family, by this time, of course, were very, very much aware and very, very supportive and always looking to get me into, the best possible doctors. And I'll never forget this doctor who diagnosed me with Crohn's disease. His name was Dr. Adrian Jones. And I'm very thankful, to the care that he provided me. We went through like a whole day of testing multiple different things, and he took good care of me and looked out for my best interests. And ultimately, it turns out that I have this Crohn's disease, which, I can leave a link in the description. You can check it out. It's basically an inflammatory condition of the digestive system from the top to the bottom that can impact you in many, many different ways. And for me, the way that it presented itself, especially originally, was, you know, abdominal pain. It caused me great pain when I was eating. And it was it was difficult to be, especially at that age when I was a decently good student. I was very invested in my education. I had a couple of very close friends in school. Kevin, that we went to the trip to Hawaii with, that I went on the trip with, and a few other people who were very supportive of me. And ultimately, with the consultation of my doctor, my mom and dad, and my own, desire to feel good, we we decided to go and take me for surgery. Now, when you're 18 years old and they explain to you sort of briefly what it is they're going to do, it doesn't necessarily resonate in the same way that it could when you're 43 years old with, a medical background. I've been nursing now for 17 years, so I really understand the implications of these kind of things that you can go through. And long story short, I ended up getting an ostomy. So I was 18 years old. If you don't know about an ostomy, I can leave a link to that in the description as well. I'm not going to describe it other than the fact that it is difficult for anyone at any age to have to endure such a thing. The day of the surgery, it went well. To my understanding, to my memory, I was there at the hospital, and my mom was there. My mom was always, she is always very supportive of me, and thank you for that, Mom. And she can remember this, of course, more clearly than I, because I was anxious, I was scared. After the surgery, I was medicated, so if there's any inaccuracies, I'm just recalling things as I remember, and maybe she'll pop in the comment section below and fill in some details that might be missed. And anyway, so we go have the surgery. I got this big incision in my middle of my abdomen, and off to the right on the right hand side, they created the ostomy. And I remember being in the room, being in the patient room that I was in, and I remember laying in the bed watching some TV. And I'd had a major surgery that morning. My mom was kind of hanging out beside me, and I was very near to the nursing desk, and everything in my mind at the time was just fine. I wasn't in that much pain, and everything seemed to be going pretty darn good. The nurses didn't seem worried. I don't remember if I'd seen the doctor or not, maybe just briefly after the surgery, and it seemed in my mind like everything was fine. Everything's going to be okay. And just like they described to me in the office, like it's fine. Everything's fine. So, and it seemed sort of out of the blue. And my mom, she's also a nurse, she's retired, and she gave many years of incredible service to so many different people. And she looked at my legs, of all things, seemingly unrelated. Uh, and there was a pattern on the skin. There was sort of an underlying blood flow situation going on that caused something called mottling, I think. And it's not even a term that I've used very much in my career. I haven't worked much in surgery other than the first year. And she recognized that pattern on my skin as it's like an internal bleeding indicator. So I guess, during the surgery, putting me back together, they either missed something, little stitch needed to be done, or maybe they nicked something with a little instrument or such, and maybe caused some bleeding. And apparently, it was decent enough to be concerning. I don't know the amount, the volume, specifically like that, but I do know as I was laying there and she was concerned about my legs, that's when things in my head started to shift. That's when I really started to feel dizzy. I started to feel lightheaded. I started to feel like, something bad was happening. So I I'm hanging out and she starts yelling. She's yelling to the nurses outside, call a code, Matthew's bleeding. And I'm like, what the heck is she talking about? I felt fine. I was like, I started to get a little bit more, a little bit lightheaded, you know what I'm saying? So I got this lightheaded feeling and I start to sort of pass out. And my head starts to kind of go back on the pillow, maybe more heavily than it was even already. And I you would think that I passed out. I think if you were in the room, I would imagine. I think my eyes were closed and I did not come off as being conscious. I wasn't alert, I wasn't oriented at the time, and I don't think I would have been responding to anyone who was talking to me, but I was very much awake and I was very much aware, but in sort of a subdued manner. It sounded and felt like I was underwater. And I was basically, to put it mildly, drifting, floating in a sort of infinite blackness around me, right? I was like in this sort of floating on a cloud kind of thing. And it felt beautiful. It felt wonderful. I just felt like I was wrapped in a blanket of warm, comfortable, safe water. And meanwhile, I can hear around me, as if the sounds are coming from underwater. Call the code, call the code. Matthew's bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. His sats are 44, 44, like the oxygen sats. And I just kept hearing these sort of like faint, distant sounds, which I believe were right next to me. So I'm swimming around in this infinite, comfortable, dark, black I don't know what it was. It was sort of the precipice of my own consciousness, I believe. And so I'm swimming around in this comfortable feeling, not understanding that around me, I think I was bleeding quite significantly, and they ended up giving me a blood transfusion. They used other fluids to push into my system, IV fluids and medicine and such to help control this. And so I think they were working pretty hard to help me out. And I believe perhaps more time passed than it felt to me at the time. It just felt like an instant. It felt like just a few moments that I was there in this place, this space, I believe, between life and death, somewhere in the middle. And it might even sound cliche. It might sound like I'm making it up, but up up into the distance, there was like a little pinprick of light, and it was beautiful. And it seemed very far away, but it was sort of rapidly moving towards me. And of course, I'd never seen anything like this. I've never experienced such a thing. And in the moment, I didn't correlate it to any stories that I'd ever heard from anyone else. But it was pleasant. It was pleasurable. And I kind of thought to myself, I believe in the moment, wow, I need to get that. I need to touch that. I need to see that. I want to feel that. Meanwhile, I can hear all these sounds happening around me. There's people um, yelling and being upset. And in that moment, I couldn't understand why would they feel like that? What is exactly going on? So I kept sort of swimming in this darkness, and I just about touched this thing. This light was coming down boom, towards me, and it sort of seemed far away, but it was rapidly approaching. And I reached out, started to get close. I just about touched it. Just before I did, it just like shot away, and I was wide awake. There was like people. My mom and the doctor, nurses, everybody was up in my face. They were shaking me and moving me around, and it was like, what's going on? And it gives, I can't see that on a camera, but it gives me the little goosebumps on my arm to think back about this experience where I believe I almost died. And I think that was this proverbial light that people describe. And I've never forgotten this experience. I've never forgotten this moment. I've told this story to people many times, and varying responses. Some people think that I'm just making it up. You're welcome to believe what you think. Let me know if you have ever experienced something like this. In the comments, let me know if you believe or if you think I'm just making this up. It's the kind of story I kind of keep to myself for the most part because of the disbelief and the experience that, okay, he saw the light. Well, I think that experience changed me in a few ways as a person. I'd like to think it made me appreciate the the simple aspect of a regular day, perhaps a little bit more than I would have otherwise. It's not that I was some, terrible, angry person, but in my teenage years, there was a bit of a struggle there between good and evil, making that right choice. And I think in some way this experience helped me to be thankful, to be appreciative, and to try to find the happiness, the joy in the simple day, in the simple thing. And just keep in mind, you never know what tomorrow or today could hold for you. And if you have the chance to be appreciative of the simple pleasure, don't forget that it's not guaranteed. Tomorrow is not assured. I wish it upon you, and I wish health and happiness for you. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you in the next one.